The storm had already taken everything else from him. The sea roared like a living beast, its waves rising and crashing with a fury that seemed personal, as though the ocean itself had decided Eli did not belong anywhere in this world. The small raft beneath his feet was nothing more than lashed planks and rope scavenged from wreckage, soaked through and splintering at the edges. Each violent swell lifted it high, then dropped it again, sending icy water slapping against his legs. His hands burned from gripping the rope too tightly, but letting go felt unthinkable. Letting go meant sinking, and sinking meant disappearing without a trace, just another nameless orphan swallowed by the sea. Eli had been drifting for 2 days, though time had lost its shape somewhere between hunger and fear. The sky had been gray for so long that he could no longer remember what clear sunlight looked like. His lips were cracked with thirst, his stomach clenched in dull, aching knots. All he had left was a small, threadbare sack tied to his belt. Inside it lay a broken compass that refused to point north, a piece of bread hardened almost to stone, and a tarnished silver locket hanging from a frayed cord. The locket was the only thing that had ever been his, given to him before memory began. He had asked about it once, long ago, and had been told only, "It's all we found with you." No name, no story, just the locket and a baby left at the edge of a dock. The wind howled louder, tearing at his thin shirt, and Eli squeezed his eyes shut as rain lashed his face. He whispered words he didn't know the meaning of anymore, half prayers, half bargains, promising the sea anything it wanted if it would just let him live a little longer. His voice was lost instantly, swallowed by the storm. Then, slowly, the world changed. The wind softened first, dropping from a scream to a low moan. The rain thinned into mist, and the waves beneath the raft grew less violent, their movements rolling instead of striking. Eli opened his eyes, blinking against the fog that clung to everything like a damp veil. The horizon was gone, erased by thick white haze, and for a moment he wondered if this was how it ended, lost in nothingness, drifting until exhaustion finally pulled him under. That was when he saw it. At first, he thought it was a trick of the fog, a shadow cast by his own fear. But the shape remained as he blinked again, dark and solid against the pale mist. Something hovered ahead of him, rising above the water at an impossible angle. His heart began to pound, and he stood unsteadily, nearly losing his balance as the raft rocked beneath him. It wasn't a ship. There were no sails, no mast cutting through the fog. And it wasn't land, not in the way land was supposed to be. What emerged from the mist was an island, suspended in the air just above the restless sea. Its underside was jagged rock, from which thick roots or chains, Eli couldn't tell which, descended into the water below. They swayed gently, as if the island itself were breathing, alive in a way that made his skin prickle. The raft drifted closer without his guidance, drawn forward by a current he couldn't feel. As the fog thinned, details sharpened. Grass covered the top of the island, lush and green beyond anything he'd ever seen. Trees rose from it, their leaves faintly luminous, casting a soft glow that made the air shimmer. For a moment, Eli forgot his fear, his hunger, even the storm behind him. Wonder filled the hollow places inside his chest. The raft bumped softly against a rocky ledge, the impact gentle compared to the violence he'd endured for days. Eli dropped to his knees, laughing weakly as relief flooded through him. His hands shook as he reached out, fingers scraping against solid stone. It was real. Whatever this place was, it was real. Summoning the last of his strength, he hauled himself up onto the ledge. The rock was warm beneath his palms, pulsing faintly, as if it held heat from a hidden sun. He lay there for a moment, chest heaving, the sound of his own breath loud in his ears. When he finally pushed himself upright, his legs wobbled, threatening to give way. He climbed higher, following a natural path that curved upward until he stood atop the island. The air here felt different, cleaner, lighter, humming with a sound too soft to hear yet impossible to ignore. Grass brushed against his ankles, cool and alive. When he reached out and touched a tree trunk, it vibrated faintly beneath his fingers, as though responding to him. At the center of the island stood a stone shelter. It was circular, built from pale blocks etched with weathered markings, yet it showed no sign of decay. No cracks. No moss. It looked ancient and new all at once, as if time had forgotten how to touch it. The doorway stood open, inviting but solemn, like the entrance to a place that remembered secrets. Eli hesitated at the threshold. Years of sleeping in alleys, barns, and abandoned boats had taught him caution. Shelter often came with a price. But exhaustion pressed down on him like a physical weight, and the warmth drifting from within the stone structure was impossible to resist. He stepped inside. The air wrapped around him like a blanket, soothing the ache in his bones. There was no fire, no visible source of heat, yet the cold left him instantly. The floor was smooth beneath his bare feet, and the walls glowed faintly, lit by veins of soft light running through the stone. Eli's knees buckled, and he sank down where he stood, unable to fight it anymore. Sleep claimed him without dreams. When he woke, he didn't know how much time had passed. The island was quiet, the storm now only a distant memory. Night had fallen, but the darkness here was gentle, illuminated by the glowing trees outside and the steady light pulsing through the shelter walls. Eli sat up slowly, his body lighter, his hunger dulled as if the island itself had eased his suffering. Something tugged at him then, not fear, not hunger, but curiosity. A sense of being called. He rose and stepped outside, following a narrow path that wound behind the shelter. The glow grew stronger as he walked, leading him to a stone door half hidden beneath thick vines and flowering plants. Symbols were carved across its surface, intricate and unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting. At the center of the door was a small indentation. Eli's breath caught. The shape was unmistakable. It matched his locket perfectly. With trembling hands, he lifted the silver charm from his chest. It felt warmer than before, almost alive, and for the first time since he could remember, he felt that the emptiness inside him might finally have an answer. The moment Eli pressed the locket into the stone, the island responded as if awakened from a long sleep. A deep vibration rolled through the ground, not violent but powerful, like the slow turning of an enormous heart. The vines covering the door recoiled, slipping aside on their own, and the carved symbols ignited with a pale silver light. Eli stumbled back a step, his pulse hammering in his ears, but the locket was already locked in place, held by a force he couldn't fight. With a sound like stone sighing after centuries of silence, the door began to open. Cool air spilled from the darkness beyond, carrying a faint metallic scent mixed with something older, dust, memory, and rain. Eli hesitated only a second before stepping forward. The fear he expected never fully arrived. Instead, a strange sense of familiarity settled over him, as though he were returning somewhere he had once known in a life he couldn't remember. The chamber beyond was vast, far larger than the exterior of the island should have allowed. The ceiling arched high above him, disappearing into shadow, while the walls curved smoothly, embedded with veins of glowing crystal that pulsed in slow rhythm. Some of the crystals floated freely in the air, suspended without support, rotating lazily as if caught in an unseen current. Their light fractured into shifting patterns that slid across the floor like living reflections. Eli took a cautious step inside. The door sealed itself behind him with a soft click, and instead of panic, he felt relief, as if the outside world had been gently shut away. The floor beneath his feet warmed and brightened where he walked, responding to his presence. Each step left a brief trail of light that faded slowly, like footprints made of memory. At the center of the chamber stood a tall mirror framed in silver metal etched with the same symbols carved into the door. Its surface shimmered like water disturbed by a breeze. Eli stopped several feet away, his reflection wavering in the glass. He looked smaller here, a thin boy in worn clothes, dwarfed by the quiet grandeur of the place. For a moment, doubt crept in. Perhaps this was a mistake. Perhaps the island was a trap, and he had just stepped into it willingly. The mirror rippled. The image of his reflection dissolved, replaced by a scene so vivid it stole his breath. He was no longer seeing the chamber, but the island itself, bathed in golden light beneath a clear sky. Figures stood in a circle, men and women dressed in flowing robes, their faces calm but heavy with sorrow. At the center of them stood a woman holding a baby. Eli's chest tightened. He knew, without being told, that the child was him. The woman's hair was dark, pulled back loosely, strands escaping as the wind brushed her face. Her eyes shone with unshed tears as she pressed her forehead to the infant's. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling with both love and resolve. "This is the only way to keep you safe." One of the robed figures stepped forward, placing a hand over his heart. "The sanctuary will remember him," he said gently. "No matter where he goes. No matter how long it takes." Another figure raised a small silver locket, its surface unmarked and bright. Eli felt his breath catch as the woman took it, fastening it carefully around the baby's neck. She whispered words in a language Eli didn't understand, but as she spoke them, a warmth spread through his chest, echoing the feeling he'd had when he first touched the island. The image shifted again. Now he saw the island drifting higher into the sky, pulling away from the land below. In the distance, smoke rose from burning cities, and the sea churned with ships locked in battle. Magic crackled in the air like lightning. The robed figures stood watching, their faces grim. The woman remained at the edge of the island, her gaze fixed downward, tears streaming freely now. He will return, she said softly, as if promising the wind itself. The mirror darkened, the vision fading until Eli was staring once more at his own reflection, wide-eyed, pale, and trembling. Before he could speak, a voice filled the chamber. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, resonating through the crystals, the walls, and even his bones. It was neither male nor female, young nor old, but carried the weight of centuries. Eli, the voice said, and hearing his name spoken with such certainty sent a shiver through him. Last living heir of the skybound sanctuary. The crystals brightened, their pulsing rhythm quickening. Eli's legs felt weak, and he sank to his knees. I don't understand, he whispered, his voice barely audible in the vast space. I'm nobody. I've always been nobody. You were hidden, not lost, the voice replied gently. This island was raised to escape a world unraveling under its own hunger. Its keepers swore to protect knowledge, balance, and life itself. When the war reached even the skies, they made one final choice, to send the youngest heir away. The floor beneath Eli glowed brighter, symbols spiraling outward from where he knelt. He felt something stir inside him, a deep resonance, as though the island were answering a call he had never known how to make. The locket at his chest grew warm, vibrating faintly against his skin. The sanctuary answers only to blood and bond, the voice continued. You carry both. Images flooded his mind, brief flashes of places he had never seen, words he had never learned yet somehow understood, and a vast network of floating islands once connected by light. He gasped, clutching his chest as the sensations overwhelmed him. The world below has forgotten balance, the voice said, its tone darkening. Greed and fear have grown unchecked. The sanctuary has waited for you to choose. Choose what? Eli asked, lifting his head. You may leave, the voice answered. Return to the world as you were. The island will not stop you. Or you may stay. Learn what was protected here. Decide whether the sanctuary remains hidden, or rises again. Silence followed, heavy and expectant. Eli stood slowly, his knees still shaking. He thought of the streets where he'd slept hungry, the faces that had passed him without seeing him, the endless fight just to survive another day. He thought of the woman in the mirror, her grief and hope woven together, and of the island that had caught him when the sea would not. He placed a hand over the locket, feeling its steady warmth. For the first time in his life, he wasn't being pushed by fear or desperation. The choice was his. I've spent my whole life running, he said quietly. His voice steadied as he spoke. If this place waited for me, then I won't abandon it. The crystals flared with light, brilliant and welcoming. The voice softened, carrying something like approval. Then the sanctuary recognizes you. Above the chamber, the island shifted gently in the sky, adjusting its course, as if responding to its heir at last. And as Eli stood bathed in living light, he understood that being an orphan had never meant being alone, it had only meant his home was waiting for him to return.